Okay, break time is over. The holidays were fun, family stuff caused some delay, but now it's time to get back into the nitty-gritty. Welcome back, people of Earth and elsewhere. Seasons 3 and 4 of Voltron Legendary Defender are a thing to be discussed in depth, and are actually the key reason this video series exists in the first place.
Don't lie.
I'm not lying! In case you've managed to find this video before the first one in this series, I must tell you that the disclaimers and spoiler warnings are all in that part, so I suggest you watch that before this. The link is in the description. If you don't really care that much about Zarkon days and are okay with running right into the very long talk about Lotor, then by all means stick around. Everyone else who's followed me here from the last video, thanks for coming back. Let's rock this joint. Fine, one last warning. Just in case you didn't catch the video subtitle, this is the part of both Voltron and me talking about the show that essentially boils down to being the Lotor part. If you're not a fan of Prince Starscream of the Purple Thundercats, you will probably have problems with this particular video, because I personally have a lot to say about him. But in contrast to what I originally thought going into this video series, I actually found a lot more to talk about regarding the middle portion of the show. Full disclosure, before I decided the rest of the show was actually worth talking about, I was just going to make a very long talk about Lotor and leave it at that. However, I realized after Season 8 that there would be no closure if I just left it at that, so I'll make my effort to leave Lotor out of at least 50% of this video, because Seasons 3 and 4 accomplish a lot more than introducing another villain to be wasted. Well, we'll see how far that goes. Now let's get back to it. Wish me luck!
Well, old Blue, we sure had some fun adventures, didn't we? I wanted to stay with you, but sometimes what we want isn't necessarily what we get.
At this juncture, Netflix Voltron introduces something very important this season. Something that changes the entire plot structure and pacing of the series. Half-seasons! We'll talk more about my distaste for these half-seasons later, but first, let's go over what the major points of this half-season that was packaged as a full season has for us. First, Voltron rallying a coalition behind them to fight the Galra properly. Next, hi Lotor, then Shiro's disappearance and reunion with the team, and finally, the all-important origin of Voltron and the war for the universe. It's only a half-season, so maybe I can summarize this all quickly. It is good to know that as Voltron is liberating planets, they do their best to get them to back the new Voltron front against the Galra Empire. They do everything from propaganda appearances to providing medical aid and supplies to the damaged systems, so they are putting together a much bigger plan of attack. The time is ripe because we seem to think that Zarkon is dead. P.S. He's not. Lotor's introduction is fabulous, and he does more in half a season than Zarkon did in 2. I always said that he was the more interesting of the two, and everything else that I can say about him would be better put in the full season overview, but nothing bad to say about him yet. Shiro disappearing shuffles the paladins around, and we get one of these moments that messes with our OCD because suddenly most of them don't match their lions in color, and it bugs. That being said, I could rant about that, or talk about how great it is to watch Keith having to deal with being the head of Voltron and confronting his own fears. Lance having to admit that he accepts Keith as the leader, putting aside any personal feelings and or glory-seeking, which then makes him the paladin of the Red Lion. Then Allura needing to come to terms with the fact that she was not destined to be the Red Lion's paladin, even though she really wanted to be, like her father before her, probably. Only then is she accepted by the Blue Lion in Lance's stead. These are good for the characters, and the change-up leads to tension that the team needs to get through in later episodes, especially with Keith leading and having a brand new thing to obsess over, that being, Lotor is his father's son, we have to get rid of him pronto. Bold of you to assume Lotor wants anything to do with his father or the Empire. Then Shiro, I am making air quotes when I say his name, comes back and things get awkward, but the Black Lion doesn't take Shiro back, and he is fully supportive of the decision made both by the Lion and himself from the previous season. This now puts Keith in charge. Finally, the last episode of this half-season gives us the background on why all of this is happening in the first place. Told by Karan, a story of a meteor, a group of planetary leaders who put their differences aside for the sake of the greater good, and Altean alchemy that went far beyond what was reasonable. The one major problem I have with this is the fact that Karan is the one telling the story. No, not because he's Karan, but because it took 2.5 seasons and the Black Lion switching paladins repeatedly to finally get it out of him. Now, if they made some sort of excuse that 10,000 years of hypersleep in the palace had scrambled his memories a bit and it took this long for him to get all the details back in order, fine. But up until this point, it's just been this little cliquey Altean-only secret on a need-to-know basis, that he and Allura seem to think that the Defenders of the Universe didn't need to know. Remember, they even skipped out on telling them who the previous paladin of the Black Lion was. Wow, guys, just wow. But the flashback is a serviceable explanation about what happened leading up to Zarkon's Reign of Terror. It turns out that he and Hagar weren't always evil, and they weren't evil of their own volition, but being exposed to powers outside of their control, which they then tried to control, ended up in only what can be described as their deaths. This transdimensional meteor crashed into the former Galra homeworld of Divazal, and that's what Voltron was eventually made out of by Alora's father, King Alfor. The meteor crashing into the planet opened a space-time rift that leaked quintessence, oh boy, and other things. This Altean alchemist named Onerva is in charge of experimenting on the rift, and well, she becomes Hagar when she and Zarkon, who got married at some point between here and there, they are overexposed to the quintessence field beyond the rift and essentially become zombies. These zombies being barely shells of their former selves, with very little of their original personalities being retained. Which only had me asking, okay, so how does Lotor fit into all of this? Is he there, kid? My questions aside, this episode was one of the few times that flashbacks were used effectively in this show, and it was refreshing to see how the Voltron legend came to be, in addition to seeing the friendships between the other paladins. Alfor and Zarkon had a really fun dynamic going, and watching it all fall apart really was kind of sad. Continuing forward, we have the second half of Season 3 that masquerades as Season 4. What do we need to know that happens here? Well, Keith essentially forces the Black Lion back into Shiro's hands and leaves the castle team, Zarkon returns, the Coalition rallies, Lotor is outed as a third party, and saves the universe himself. Pacing much? It gets worse in Season 4, but again, I'll explain more about that in due time. We have another problem here. We are switching up the paladins again. This is a pretty minor gripe at this point, but some people might recall me praising Keith in the last season for deciding he was willing to ditch his blade and connection to the Galra for the sake of Voltron. Or maybe just the sake of the universe? Either way, for the greater good. Now, halfway through the next season, he decides he's going to go back on that. The entire start of Season 3 was about Voltron, rallying a rebellion against the Empire behind Voltron. Shiro's not here, so we need to fix this problem because people are asking about Voltron. Keith, get it together. We need Voltron. Get over yourself. It's time to shine. It almost looked like we were going to get that. We started off really strong, with Keith being like, no, please, don't make me the head of Voltron, because him being the head means two things. The first being that he had to accept that they can't find Shiro, and he, more than anyone else, wants to find Shiro. The second is, holy crow, I have to be in charge of people now. And he's not comfortable with that. He'd rather be with the Blades, because they're still technically the good guys and helping save the universe, right? He starts coming out of it, he's driving the Black Lion. We have a whole episode and a half about how divisive it is to the team, that they have to have a new dynamic now, and Keith needs to be a better leader instead of going with his hot-headed instinct. He even manages to pull a fast one on Lotor against Shiro's advice in the recent half-season. He is becoming a leader. And then we backpedal on that completely. Just when we thought Keith was getting good and becoming the leader of Voltron he was destined to be, he literally tears the team apart for his own reasons. He starts hanging out with the Blades of Marmora like they're the cool kids, and pretty much admits to staying out of the way of Voltron so that an emergency would happen and the Black Lion would be forced to take Shiro back. That is scummy, Keith. In the confrontation after Shiro gets back in the head, no one buys his apology because he almost got a lot of people killed. When we finally discuss his reasons, those being, Shiro is back so he should be the leader and I want to work with the Blades to track Lotor faster, they just kind of hug it out and say, okay, Keith, we'll make Voltron work without you. Bye. You go and be that lone wolf we called you in Season 1. Yeah, we just let his character development slip out the window and stand stock still in space for the next season and a half. Don't forget to write. I know there's a level of understanding we have to have here, and letting Keith do his own thing isn't completely detrimental to the story as a whole. Heck, let's face it, the Blades are really cool, and seeing more of them is fun. But why do we have to preface this with so much positive reinforcement that he was finally filling in Shiro's shoes? Keith is an insecure teenager. It would make perfect sense for him to just not be a great leader at this point at all, and have everybody know and acknowledge it. Then he jumps ship when Shiro comes back because he can't handle it. We could still have the Black Lion chose you, Keith, embrace it moment with Shiro, and people could kind of encourage Keith to keep trying, but it's still not working, so the situation ends up the same. Then he goes off, finds himself, and comes back ready to be an actual part of the team. I'm not mad, Keith, I'm just disappointed. And I'm disappointed in the rest of you for letting him go because the whole Six Paladins thing happened to work out in your favor. Whatever, the Blades are part of the Voltron coalition, so it's not like Keith is actually that far away. Now, let's talk about Lotor just a bit to explain why I like him more than Zarkon as far as villain potential goes. Right out of the gate, when we meet Lotor, we get to see a lot of things about him. He's charismatic, he can fight, he's observant, he has his own plans, which he prides himself on in being different from his father's, and he is a sneaky manipulator. Lotor is a schemer and a slippery son of a snake. For most of a season, he's one of the things in the front of Voltron's mind, and he just sits there and bugs the team like he's a problem, and we know he's a problem, we are trying to solve this problem, but we can't seem to hit him. We can see him being 2 steps ahead of Voltron and practically has them on puppet strings, and he doesn't care that they seem to see him as a direct enemy. He's not even going out of his way to prevent any of the other things they're doing. Forming a coalition? Fine. Sending supplies and medical aid to rebellious systems? Meh. Dismantling the Galra Empire? Lotor doesn't care, because these things are just distracting the rest of the Empire, which he is supposedly given temporary control of, which no one believes, by the way, from whatever plans he is working on in his own time. What made Lotor so interesting in this 3rd season was that he was cunning and clearly out for his own gains, rather than trying to replace his father and rule the universe. He's his own entity, and his own faction that was not in collusion with either Voltron or the Galra Empire at the time, which meant that he could be either a terrifying enemy or a surprisingly powerful ally to either, depending on which suited his needs. We were just waiting to see which side he would favor. For the most part, it seemed like the Empire was where his dubious loyalties lied. But when Zarkon was revived and Hagar outed his secret plans where he was clearly making a weapon comparable to Voltron for himself, Lotor becomes a fugitive. Captured by his own generals, he escapes. He's on the run for a while, and we see what kind of risks he's willing to take to save his own skin. And then he intercepts a Galra transmission about how a gigantic bomb is about to blow up about 1/3 of the known universe. Oh, really? Well, guess who's equipped to ambush Hagar's ship, punch through the shield no one can break through, the weapon being used to activate the bomb and the other side of the shield. I'll give you a hint. It's not Keith who was about to try and kamikaze his way through it. We all know that wouldn't have worked, right? Everyone was about to die. I'm talking Voltron and all of its allies, Keith even more in vain than anyone else, and Lotor just swoops in and saves everybody easily at the last minute like some sort of unlikely hero. That is a power play right there, and the season ends just like that. Once again, we have a great villain set up, a pretty brilliant character who at this point could have gone in any which direction, and we are left off this season wondering how this will play out. Lotor just trumped their ace. Voltron couldn't do anything at this point, even with Allura Ex Machina at play. He's a wild card who just surprised both of the main factions and said, "Okay, good guys, I just saved your skins, now let's talk." How could they follow this up? Well, by making it way more complicated than it had to be. Much like in the last video, what the first season I covered did in favor of the antagonist, the second breaks down and destroys utterly. With those important bits out of the way, let's see what else we have to say about this season. The theme song hasn't changed. The music itself shouldn't have to do anything new, but just the fact that the paladins have all been shuffled around and no longer match the theme song, Zarkon is out of commission, and Lotor has shown up, you'd think we could at least change up the visuals a bit to match that. Perhaps I'm just a little too used to anime openings, though. Once again, the color coding is off, and this bugged Chase more than it bugged me. While I understand part of this is another callback to the original show where Pidge was the only one whose outfit matched his lion, I've just gotta ask why we had to keep that of all details. I mean, couldn't we just be wearing magical paladin uniforms that change color according to the lion you're piloting, or what Bayard you're holding? Because Lord only knows why they had to swap up the Bayards, too. The paladin uniforms don't seem to be that special because the ones being worn by the new paladins are different from the old ones. Also, Allura gets a pink one pretty easily. How about the insides of these lions, eh? While I'm at it, how do these work? Are the seats not adjustable? Because while it is funny to laugh at Pidge not being able to reach anything in the Black Lion, Zarkon is huge compared to Shiro, let alone Keith, so how does that work? Do the lion's insides change according to the paladin driving? So, there's this Altean ship transporting a meteor like the one that Voltron is made out of stuck between dimensions, realities. Why do we have to make the distinction between alternate realities and alternate dimensions anyway? So, is this ship just in, such an out-of-the-way location that no one ever runs into it for 10,000 years or so? because supposedly King Alfor was still alive and gave the final command that it be kept out of Zarkon's hands, and that was a long time ago. As it is now, no one can really get close enough to search it, so you'd think it would be blockaded or quarantined off so that no one could get close, as it is a hazard to most everything. Or is this something that only Lotor and the people who work close to him know about, and he's just hiding it from the Empire because he knows what's up here? You know, I'm gonna go with that explanation because Lotor explains a lot, but when did he find it? Also, let's just make sure we know that Allura is the evil space-controlling empress of an alternate dimension, so she better be happy about the reality she's got now. Wait, what's this about the Black Lion being able to teleport? I suppose we'll just assume that the rest of the team told Shiro about Lotor, and he doesn't randomly have circumstantial knowledge. Speaking of which, they are still letting him wear the Black Paladin armor even after he's not driving the Black Lion for a while. I really, really want to know where Allura got all of her training from. Combat, the castle, random Altean stuff. Of all the flashbacks we should have, it would be nice to know that she can't just do this stuff because she's Allura. Hagar mind-jacking Narti is stupid. Okay, let me explain. So, Narti is blind, and she uses this cat to be able to see things, and it's actually pretty cool how it works. She can also use mind-jacking powers to see through other people and control them while she has contact with them physically, or from what we've seen, that's how it works. The cat is the only thing that she can seem to commune with from a distance and use as eyes from an extended range. Furthermore, it doesn't act like it's being controlled as much as helping her like a guide animal. When you realize that this cat is Kolva, the immortal cat Onerva had as a pet and consequently Hagar has had a connection to in the past, wouldn't it make more sense for her to mind-jack him? In theory, Hagar can't see anything just from Narti's point of view because she's blind. What we're supposed to get here is that Hagar is mind-jacking Narti and then seeing through Kolva's eyes because Narti is using Kolva, which is needlessly complicated. Also, we have a problem here with Narti being apparently mute, because as an audience we can't tell if it's just her vision being controlled. If she has any other mannerisms that Lotor could identify as being off or different, or he just came to the conclusion that she was being used to spy on him based on the fact that she was the one that was around when they encountered Hagar is not. Okay, so it's probably that second part, but can we be sure? Because of her prior connection to the cat and assuming he would have no problem working for his old master, Kolva being the plant that leads Zarkon to Lotor makes much more sense. Narti still has her eyes, but they are being shared by Hagar, and if the plant is the cat, then Narti herself wouldn't be suspicious either. Of course, we can never tell what she's thinking, what's going on in her head, or how she feels about the whole thing, and that is frustrating up the wazoo. Furthermore, if Kolva was the real plant, Lotor assuming Narti was the one being manipulated against him, and then being wrong while killing her to cut off Hagar's connection, reflects back on him being paranoid and actually unwilling to trust anyone, let alone have anyone trust him. The good thing to come out of the Zarkon and Lotor conflict this starts is that Zarkon finally has something else to focus on than the Black Lion. Also, let's talk about the irony of Hagar chastising Lotor and saying things like, "An emperor who is not present is not effective," because that's how I described Zarkon as a villain in the last video. Lotor isn't a fugitive for very long before he saves Voltron, so I'll go ahead and say that the Galra Empire hasn't had time to change their radio frequencies to things he wouldn't be able to track. I don't like the Voltron show episode. I think it's filler-y, the gags are annoying, and we didn't even get to see Shiro in this very tight shirt. While the point here in relation to the actual story is to build morale before they make a huge hit on the Galra, and maybe give us an episode about Koran for a change, I feel like this could have been spent doing other things. Probably with Lotor, but I digress. Also, in this episode they mention interplanetary or intergalactic time dilation, and that makes me mad. Notes about the planet bomb thing. Hagar hasn't told anyone else about this, so now we know where Lotor gets his penchant for secrecy from. Then, Allura mentions Noxella being infused with a decommissioned Altean terraforming plant. This isn't the reality with the space tyrant Alteans, but why are they terraforming things? Allura, you're the heart of Voltron that united us and told us about our destiny. You can get us out of this magical gravitational field that Voltron couldn't punch through on its own and get us off of this planet bomb. But I'm not trained! Oh, really? Allura, what have you been trained for? You either tell us this right now, or use your BS powers to get them off this rock. Now hurry up. We can't have Lotor looking even better. I mean, what would it be like if you really couldn't combat Hagar's magic at this very moment? You still have things to learn? Lotor saving everyone has a more personal stake because Voltron would have been helpless? Well, screw that. Don't worry, the season had other good things too. I like that even Allura doesn't know how she managed to pin which one of the Earthlings was going to drive which line at the start. She admits that even if she knew how, trying to find a replacement paladin in all of the universe would be nigh impossible, so it's good to know that she has limitations. I will forever remember Throck as being a horribly unfortunate victim of Lotor's manipulation. The Shiro Returns episode is particularly well animated. Throughout this season, we get more Keith and Shiro brotherly moments, and this makes me happy, in spite of Keith's character regression. In the Paladins versus Not the Lotor fan club, we get to see that Keith is ambidextrous. Speaking of which, I don't know exactly why this is, but all of Lotor's generals are female, and it's taking all of my self-control to not just straight up call them his fan club. It's not like they're indignantly acting like fangirls, but come on, guys. Come on. And reportedly, they are all half Galra, like he is revealed to be. Alternate universe Shiro is named Sven, which is the English name of the Shiro character in the original Voltron who died. He says something about a space hospital, and I feel like that's a reference too, but I could be wrong. Every time the mice are helpful, it makes me happy. Your failure is disappointing. Lotor, this is on you, because the ladies were just following your instructions to the letter. Keith got the better of you because you got cocky and didn't think that Voltron could outmaneuver you. Lotor, you done goofed here, now go sit in the corner. Onerva's Altean marks on her face are red, and I felt the need to point this out because up until here, the rest of them seem to be color-coded pink for girl and blue for boy. I'm a leg, said 60% of all Voltron leg paladins ever. Hagar getting her memories back is important, but somehow she knows that Zarkon was her husband and hasn't concluded who Lotor's mother is. To be fair, we didn't get confirmation of that until the end of the Deathly Shiros anyway. Finally, another Pidge-centric episode. There is everything to love about this, from solo Pidge action, which she has all the permissions for and we assure you will not jeopardize the state of Voltron like someone, to tearful family reunions. Even the flashbacks in this episode are well done because they are related to the rest of the episode. I love Katie and Matt's dynamic, and Matt is a great support character overall, super helpful, so happy he's not dead. But while I do believe that Pidge effectively disguised herself as a boy and no one recognized her at the garrison as Katie Holt, was there not anyone around who was suspicious of a clone of Matt Holt suddenly showing up there? Zarkon's like, Hagar, you put who in charge of the Empire while I was in a coma? Karan, Allura, milkshakes, cow. Lance can milk a cow. They are suddenly rethinking the milkshakes. Hunk and Pidge still have a great thing going on between them. Hearing them tech banter is amusing, and getting that Hunk is actually one of the smart ones on the team is always a good vibe. Adding Matt to the bunch just makes it that much better. Thank goodness we got the memo that Lotor is a fugitive, and Voltron uses that as their window of opportunity to attack the Empire, when Zarkon is chasing his son instead of chasing his former lion. Also, I actually do like that based off of assumptions, they just kind of come to the conclusion that Lotor and Zarkon are battling for the throne. Even though half of what Lotor has done makes no sense to them, they just assume it's for universal control. Lotor is just that much of an enigma. Finally, applying the invisibility tech to the entire body of Voltron is pretty cool to see, and the fact that it's faulty speaks for how much they still have to perfect in terms of technology. Even Pidge isn't perfect, but still best girl. Let's remember that this is where we first mentioned the Zyforge cannons. Random flexibility appreciation for Lotor's daring escape. Also, as he escapes, he doesn't attempt to get rid of his generals, who are going to use them as a bargaining chip to save their own skins. I think this has something to do with the next season's finale, but I hope I'm wrong. I really, really hope I'm just misremembering a lot of stuff about Season 4. Yay! More half seasons! Also, upon further inspection, my memories were not wrong. Season 4 is pretty terrible. You see, the reason I hate the half-season thing is because when you get to a point like Season 4, and people are really liking the show, there are certain expectations set. And if you package a half-season calling it a full season, you have to treat it like a full season, with a fun finale and all that other stuff. Now, there might have been a plan for all of the episodes, and it might have looked good on paper, but dang, it doesn't play out very nicely when it's all together like this. Part 1 of Season 4 had a crap ton of ground to cover, and they just covered it all in a blinding flash like, okay, what do we have to check off this season? Let's see, Lotor joins Voltron, we find Pidge and Matt's dad, we kill off Zarkon. In the first 2 episodes of the season? Yeah. Okay, what else? Well, the Paladins trust Lotor now and are willing to help him become the Emperor proper, give Lance half an episode for development, Sendak comes back and is working with Hagar in collusion with Lotor's former generals, and Lotor does become the Emperor. All in the next 2 episodes? Yes. Do I want to know what happens in the finale? Lotor and Voltron are allies now, and he and Allura do a lot of bonding over Altean ancient stuff, and they find space Atlantis where Allura gets even more magic powers. Oh, well that sounds reasonable. Also, half an episode is devoted to the Paladins messing with the Galra sentry for gags, and Keith meets his space cat mom. Dang it! In all seriousness, they put a lot of stuff into these 6 episodes, and some of it just is already unraveling what we were getting out of Season 3. Remember how I could summarize the things to come out of a season in a couple of sentences in the last video? Well, I was having a hard time doing that for all of these half-seasons because suddenly a lot more was happening in much shorter spans of time, and stuff just kept getting more convoluted. Okay. Let's give it a shot. Lotor Rising. Yep, that basically sums it up. Thank you, Chase. The one major focus of this half-season is building up Lotor as an ally and getting him in charge of whatever portions of the Empire that will follow him. However, as with anything else, there are problems with how this comes about. 2 major problems in this case. The first is that to make Lotor the guy in charge of the Galra, we must get rid of Zarkon. Like, for real this time, because he's not dead yet. Or, he was? How do we do it? Zarkon just got back a little into the last half-season, and 2 episodes into this one, Lotor kills him. Now, amusing as this fight was, we have very little preface for this direct encounter, and it is underwhelming in pretty much every way. We have seen enough of Lotor to appreciate him as a character, but what have we seen regarding this conflict between him and his father? Up until this point, we're working mostly with implications, but until the last few episodes of the last season, there wasn't a conflict there at all. Why? Well, maybe it's because Zarkon was in a coma, but it's mostly because Zarkon and Lotor didn't give a flying fork about what each other were doing. We have literally one very short conversation to work with here between the 2 of them, and it amounts to Zarkon saying Lotor is a bitter disappointment as an heir and unworthy to lead the Empire, and Lotor walking away smirking with his dad to his back like, whatever, have fun with your collapsing castle. Only when Hagar outs Lotor for building the anti-Voltron does Zarkon actually give a damn about what his son is doing. And Lotor is forced to be aware of his father's actions because they are directed towards killing him. Nothing we are told before this establishes a sense that their relationship is anything more than a Megatron to Starscream kind of thing, where Lotor just stays out of Zarkon's way while he does his own things to no discernible end. This analogy also kind of falls flat because Starscream in most iterations of Transformers is actively making attempts to overthrow Megatron, or, passively, depending on the Starscream, whereas Lotor has shown no interest in dethroning his father at all. He was just acting Emperor because it didn't go against what he was trying to accomplish, though it wasn't something that he thought was necessary either. Anyway, here's where the conflict started. We have it vaguely implied that there's also some tension here due to Lotor being only half Galra, and it probably goes deeper than that, but I digress. During their battle, Zarkon describes Lotor as his darkest shame and says his Altean blood makes him weak. As stated just now, Lotor always came across as having a difference of opinion with his father, and Lotor is rejected by a majority of the Empire because of that, but in no way has he ever made it a point to confront him directly in combat, probably because he knows he can't win. While Lotor has battle prowess, his driving characteristic is being cunning and manipulative, and that was how he intended to bring Zarkon down. Not the Galra way, which was direct combat. If we look at the opening scene of the next episode, Lotor doesn't even look happy about it, as though this was clearly not a thing he wanted to happen. What I'm getting from the entire encounter was that Lotor was trying to overcome Zarkon, but he wanted to do it in a way that was starkly different than the Galra traditions he was raised with and rejected by. In conclusion, Lotor was looking to work at a distance and, sometime in the future, show off what he could accomplish and rally people behind him after proving he was better than his father because of what made him different. But that's not what happened. Nor was what I just described made clear by the show before this moment, or in the next episode for that matter. In the end, we get the Lotor vs. Zarkon fight, which has some dramatically symbolic lighting changes, and while it was fascinating to watch, does not have the weight it should considering the end result. At this point, we have no reason to believe that Lotor is good guy enough to make him a satisfying end to the villain of a previous season. I mean, wouldn't we have rather have had Shiro versus Zarkon again? Then, the fight itself doesn't present him as a character who is bad guy enough to make the audience think, oh shoot, Zarkon was just a distraction, this guy is the real problem here. I've had problems with things like this in the past. Lotor didn't win because he was better than Zarkon. He didn't win at all in my account. He wasn't seen using his cunning and trickery to overcome an opponent harder, better, faster, stronger than he is, like how we were brought to think that he might. He only manages to land one blow on Zarkon, and while it looks impressive enough, it's not exactly slowing the evil Emperor down. And when it does seem to be taking a toll, Lotor is still getting pummeled. Happenstance is what kills Zarkon. He was facing away from Lotor just long enough for him to stab him in the back. Fights between the boss-level characters can do two things. Make the new boss look better, or make the old boss look worse. This fight does the latter, because Lotor wasn't better. Zarkon was just subpar compared to what he seemed to be in the previous seasons. Which is saying something. So yeah, Lotor killed Zarkon, and it felt shallow to me. What has Lotor gone through, proven, or otherwise done to earn the right to deal the final blow? Things that we learn in retrospect, and by the time that comes around, it's just too late. The damage is done. The second gripe I have with this Lotor-centric season is this. The Paladins trust him, but I don't. Here we begin the contradiction-riddled character that is Lotor, and it just breaks apart how cool he was in Season 3, or at least what I thought made him cool in Season 3. This half-season does its darndest to make Lotor seem like a good guy, when the entire last season it was clear that he's not a character you can trust. The very first thing we see him do is defeat Throck in battle, spare his life, and then send him out to the most miserable outpost in the universe he can think of, essentially to rot for plotting against him. Throck is then further manipulated into being a scapegoat for losing a giant teledove lens, which was stolen by Lotor, and is tortured for several episodes for information he doesn't have. And Lotor is smiling. There's no way a guy who does that is a straight arrow. Then, we had the all-incriminating execution of Narti, who I could argue was probably his most faithful general. He executed her based off of an assumption, and as I said earlier, the story could have been better written to prove that assumption wrong, where his random killing her out of the blue didn't solve the problem and he's just being paranoid. Lotor clearly has trust issues, and all of this just leads me to believe he's a villain whose threat is much more subtle, but also much scarier than Zarkon was. Then we do a 180. Lotor is suddenly a good guy and we're supposed to believe that? Now, to be fair to the people in the series who fall for his tricks, none of them were around for these incidents I just listed off. The only people who knew were Lotor's generals, and they are not associating with him currently. But honest to goodness, did the writers really expect me, as an audience member, to think Lotor was just going to be a permanent ally of Voltron when he's sitting around in the house arrest cell in the Castle of Lions making faces like this? Yo, Lotor, you're not fooling anyone. Even when he's giving Voltron all the information they need in order to help break down the Empire more, he's still suspicious as heck, and it makes sense that no one wants to let him out in the open. But landing the killing blow on Zarkon is something that they're thankful for, and that's what ends up turning them around and believing in him. Honestly, I'd think that saving the universe was a much bigger deal, but that's probably just me. Also, why does the fact that he just killed the Galra leader, which makes him more readily able to take the throne, a good thing for them? They just spent the entire last season thinking the throne was what Lotor wanted, and now that it's there for him, they think that he deserves to take it just because he took out the former king pain in the butt? No, it was because all of the rest of the things he did to help them all until this point. Hello, that was still taking down his dad's empire, and if that had been his motive, why would anything have changed just because he's helping Voltron do it? So yeah, we get the power vacuum thing going, the Galra is splintering into factions, Sendak is back and working with Hagar, who Lotor super hates by the way, and putting Prince Starscream on the throne looks like a good idea to the Paladins because he's the one they can trust. The most. Out of all these other Galra, apparently. Seriously though, he doesn't stop saying super suspicious stuff. He keeps bringing up the former alliance between King Alfor and Zarkon as paladins of Voltron and spouting off all these really idealistic things about bringing peace to the Empire and spreading the ideals of their fathers as a standard or whatnot. Again, that sounds good when you don't remember Throck and Narti and how close Lotor came to getting himself killed in order to keep himself alive. Then we have the clincher. The part where I just can't make sense of any of this, no matter which way I try. Quintessence. Ugh. That may as well be a trigger word. Like, I think the minute Lotor said the word out loud, the Paladins should have seen the red flags. He says that the Empire requires it, that the Galra require it. So, his plan is to get to the Quintessence field, you know, the one that destroyed Zarkon and Minerva, and use that as a way to distribute it, so that the Empire doesn't have to use giant life force-sucking cannons to kill planets for it? What? Now hold on a second here. Have any of the other Galra commanders ever mentioned the desire or need for quintessence? I don't recall any incidents of anyone other than Zarkon and Hagar actually talking about it. There's no evidence of what Lotor is saying is true, and the fact that he is blatantly telling them, I am trying to harvest an infinite amount of the most powerful energy source known to any reality, sits well with these guys? Honestly, as the season goes on and his relationship with Allura grows stronger, what part of this is okay? You still haven't done anything to convince me that Lotor is actually trustworthy, because of his history in the past season. I could make a drinking game out of the number of times he brings up your father, our fathers, Altean culture, or Royal Alliance for Peace, and crap like that when he's talking to her. These are Allura's trigger words. It's crap she wants to hear, and he's just feeding it to her. Why did anyone believe this was going to work out? He is clearly repeating these things to get her to help him complete his own project, and that is emotional manipulation. It is not cool. For crying out loud, I don't know what the writers were thinking here. Season 3. Lotor is a snake and clearly a potential threat to the entire universe. Season 4. We have to try and make him look like a good guy while acting like we never showed the audience what a snake he can be. And you know what the most ironic part of this is? The fact that it can be so easily fixed, so that even I would have had second thoughts about whether or not Lotor was actually a good guy. How do we fix this? 2 things. The first one I have to thank Chase for again. When he's under house arrest in the Castle of Lions at the top of the season, don't have him try and plead his way out. He should have just sat back and said, I understand. Keep me here as long as you need to figure out whether or not you can trust me. And maybe throw in some sort of internal, at least I don't have to worry about my father getting to me while I'm here. And then, the second part, have all of the important Altean bonding moments that happened in the last 2 episodes of this half season happen next. Like, directly after this. What do I mean? I mean, come up with an excuse for Lotor to start talking more to Allura while he's behind glass. He tells her who his mother is really early on, and about secrets Hagar might have in her lair in the center of the Galra Empire. We can have the conversation about how he's always been enamored with learning more about his mother's culture because he was rejected by his father's, and about his explanation into the location of Orion. And then we can get to the fun part where we somehow get a hold of a compass stone. That can be done either by having another super sneaky stealth mission to loot Hagar's lair, or we can simply do the same thing and have Allura bring him one from a place in the castle that would be comparable to her father's study, because she wouldn't have known what it was before. We can have the Orion thing play out just like it did before, and this is what brings everyone to trust Lotor when they come back safely. After this incident, we learn about Pidge and Matt's dad, whom Lotor wouldn't be aware of was related to them, and Zarkon makes his demands. The debate between whether or not to hand over Lotor is much more intense because we just started trusting him, but it can essentially play out like it did before. This also solves the Lotor kills Zarkon problem, assuming we change the win conditions to be more satisfying. Because we've spent more time with Lotor personally, and we've seen a little bit more about what's really making him tick. Trust him entirely? Probably not, probably never, but I find reordering the sequence of events makes Lotor's change to the good guy side much more palatable. Of course, this is just a brief overview that leaves out a lot of details and things that could later contradict plot points, but I am just looking to fix the here and now. Either you do that, or Lotor pilots a lion. Yeah, we're done with this part. So, if everything wasn't already falling apart around us, this second half of Season 4, aka Season 6, is where we crash and burn. The good news is, the season summary is essentially, We find out Lotor's secret he's been hiding from us that confirms he's a bad guy, and we fight. Oh, nope. We also learn that the Shiro we've been palling around with for the past 2 seasons is a clone. They actually confirmed the clone Shiro theory. Gosh dang it. Let's just rip this band-aid off already. The big secret that I was waiting for, the thing that I was sure was going to happen because I knew somehow they were going to incriminate Lotor to the point where he'd betray the Paladins and end up dying, was this. There is a secret Altean colony so well hidden beyond this thing called the Quantum Abyss, and they worship Lotor there. You know, back in Season 3 I would have joked about having found a cult to join, but at this point I was like, huh? Lotor made this colony reportedly to preserve Altean culture and hide the remaining Alteans from his father's reign of terror. That sounds like a good thing. Well, the bad part about this is that he regularly has them checked, and under the guise of making a separate colony, takes certain worthy Alteans away, and brings them to a facility where he sucks the quintessence out of them. And yes, this does kill them. I have lost count as to how many fracking times I asked, how does this make sense? Like, this is the big betrayal I was waiting for? Sure, it's a terrible thing, but why does it feel so flat? In my rewatching of the show, it hit me. I know why I don't give a flying fork about Lotor using Alteans as batteries. Because there's never been a reason for him to do it. Like, it almost seems uncharacteristic, especially with how helpful he's been in this past season. What is Lotor's big, evil, menacing, horrific endgame that he would need to do this for? We are not privy to know. Well, what makes sense here? My rationale is breaking, trying to ponder this out. This is so forced. Is this really all they could come up with? Like, is Lotor an anti-villain now? Okay, stop. Take a deep breath. From the top now. Quintessence. It's the dumbest, most underexplained, generalized explanation in this series, and considering Voltron literally runs on magic, this is a bad thing. We have it reported that after Zombie Zarkon showed up and he was conquering the universe, he was obsessed with quintessence. Hagar was using magical cult druid space witch powers to harness it, but at this point, we don't even know why. The only thing we know about quintessence is that it's some sort of super energy source that corrupts all like all absolute power does. So Zarkon went power mad and decided to go quintessence hunting. Big problem! Quintessence was discovered on the other side of a dimensional rift. When the fracted Zarkon learned that quintessence could be found anywhere other than through a reality gate? When did we learn that it could be extracted from living beings? I don't get it. Honest to goodness, what are they even using it for? I can infer that it's being weaponized by the Empire to help conquer the universe, but where is the proof of that? We've seen in Season 1 that the Empire will go to other sources to gather energy, like harvesting Balmera crystals. Battleship-class-sized ones can power ships like the Castle of Lions for a really long time, weapons, shields, and all that good stuff. I have to assume that the Empire does not in fact need quintessence. It's just that awesome clean energy alternative to every other power source they can find. The only instance in which I can think of quintessence being directly used in a physical form is in the Robeasts and Zarkon's mech and his Darth Vader power armor suit. Those look like they're directly quintessence powered. And if quintessence is so darn powerful, like powerful enough to make a cat immortal without frequent treatment, we have not seen Kulva treated with this stuff at all, mind you. For all we know, Enerva only did it once. Then one might think that the Empire has procured enough of it to make a frackin' Death Star. I mentioned this in Season 1, they've essentially made that already, but instead of blowing up planets, they're just sucking the life out of them. Do they use quintessence to power this thing? Is it just the druid powers? What's the energy exchange between these two? How do you use a little bit of energy to suck a mega metric ton of it out of a planet in exchange? Or can any other kind of energy just be turned into quintessence? Is that a thing? Because that's not consistent with the definition of quintessence we got back in Season 1. A Death Star makes way more sense, because the threat of a weapon like this could cause an entire star system to kneel before the Galra simply by existing. Haven't the Galra already been destroying and dooming star systems anyway? Why quintessence? You see, before people start correcting me on exactly why quintessence, I will say I know for Zarkon and Hagar it makes sense because of a certain explanation given in Season 6, or 8, or whatever you want to call it. But we don't have that information yet, so I'm just going to keep talking as though that explanation doesn't exist, because at this point it didn't. So, now we go back to Lotor. He is also obsessed with quintessence, and we don't have an ever-loving clue as to why. He says it will make the Empire less dependent on using barbaric methods of procuring it if they find their way to access the field. But for all we know, that's a huge lie, because no one else has ever said anything about needing it, and all evidence points to the contrary. Best case scenario, all the other Galra are only gathering quintessence because Zarkon is the one looking for it and told them to do so. So why is Lotor gathering quintessence? If he managed to come up with a more effective way of gathering it, which got him in trouble with Dad because it was un-Galra-like, why is he not discreetly using the same methods elsewhere? We know he's really good at hiding stuff he doesn't want anyone else to know about. Why is he so desperate for this stuff that he had to resort to sifting through Alteans on a colony he saved for a culture he says he wants to preserve to suck this most pure strain of quintessence out of them? When they finally reached the quintessence field, did he plan on stopping that little project because there would be nothing else, quote, necessitating it, unquote? I have peeled through every line of Lotor's dialogue and scrutinized all his actions, and it doesn't make a lick of sense. The most fun part? Every other thing that comes out of his mouth actually comes across as genuine in Season 4. Everything he says about wanting to learn more about Altean culture and all the research and exploration into it that he's done, I 100% believe that's true. If nothing else, the fact that he's obsessed with his Altean half and everything connected to it is true, and it makes sense, given what we've been shown. Out of order, but the pieces of the puzzle still manage to fit together. Change the Empire, change the Galra mindset, and undo what Zarkon has done to the universe in favor of a more peaceful way of life based on past stuff that worked better? I could believe that too. I can even believe that Lotor had feelings for Allura. They were twisted and involved him using her and her Altean heritage because that's probably the reality of what he saw her as, but true feelings nonetheless. Was that colony his idea of preserving Altean culture and saving a people that would have been killed off by the Empire? Sure, he is their savior. From what I can see from Romel's story, the quintessence sucking thing didn't start for at least a few hundred years after the colony was founded. How long is the average Altean lifespan anyway? Does this mean that Lotor thought of sucking the quintessence out of them later than the point when he founded the colony and it was in fact made for the reasons he stated? Where's the timeline? Where are my explanations? Forget what I said about Allura needing flashbacks to explain her superpowered alienness. Where are my Lotor flashbacks that are supposed to make any of this make sense? Nowhere? Okay, gonna tell me what he was even using the whole Altean quintessence for? No, not even a hint. So Lotor is outed, and he tries to explain his way out of the corner he's found himself in, but of course no one will listen to him because using people for power, literally, is morally objectionable, and we all know Lotor has never done anything like that in the past. So, Allura knocks him out, because of course it has to be Allura, screw it, and then he's abducted by Shiro, who is a clone being controlled by Hagar. Blah blah blah, Lotor still won't accept that Hagar is the Onerva he idolized. Turns out that he and Aksha had a plan, and she helps him escape because this is just what we needed. We needed it to be more confusing. Here we go. We start trying to make Lotor look like the kind of prick who had most of this planned from the start, and nothing he said was genuine, because that makes sense. Aksha was in charge of leading Azor and Zethrid against Lotor to make it more convincing that he was actually on Voltron's side. Does this mean it was a tactic to make them trust him? Is that an underhanded way of manipulating them for a later betrayal? Or was it just, okay, I'll gain their trust faster if I do this, you can join us soon later? I can't even tell at this point. He tries again and again to get the Paladins, that is mostly Allura, to listen to him and all this stuff, saying he does want to reform the universe. But who's gonna listen to you now, Lotor? Allura's like, you betrayed me, which technically isn't even true. He was telling you not everything he knew, okay? But was there anything he was saying or did that turned out to be unserviceable to you and your cause? No! Nothing Lotor did is currently being used against them when he got busted. The castle is dead in the water and Keith is out in space because Shiro is the one who turned on them. That'll bleed into how brilliant the second major disappointment of the season is, trust me. I can understand how Allura would feel betrayed, knowing how a part of the remnants of her people were being used by him, but nothing he said or did jeopardized her or her known allies. Lotor, by definition, did not betray them. He really only ever helped them, and they are the ones betraying him at this moment. It just makes me ill, because at this point I can't even say what kind of character Lotor is supposed to be. Allura says he's like his dad, and then he cracks. Very subtly, but you can see his mind breaking, and suddenly he's on the offensive, saying he's going to eradicate everything that gets in his way, including whatever is left of the Galra Empire. Of course, Aksha, Azor, and Zethred are like, uh-oh, and they decide to get off of Lotor's side for real this time. Well, Lotor's like, fine, I've always been alone anyway, and puts together the anti-Voltron so we can get our fun time finale fight, which is epic and fun and ends up with Lotor just going crazy and being left in the Quintessence field to die. Because, yeah, that's what he deserved. Now, let me ask completely seriously, what is Lotor? He's not a villain. Anything that incriminates him as a villain either had the option to be fixed and was botched by the Paladins, or came out of his mouth after he had his internal breakdown, and there was no way of telling if it's legitimate or just the ramblings of a madman.
Power is mine. All realities will fall to the new Altean Empire.
He sounds nuts! If this was his plan from the beginning, I sure would have liked that to have been realized before cracking like an almond. Is he supposed to be an anti-villain? Like a misunderstood good guy with actual good intentions, but didn't realize that the end does not in fact justify the means? I can't tell, because Season 3 had him being vindictive and out for his own good, with a hint that he could be like an anti-hero who was willing to do things for the greater good if it benefited him. Season 4, Half 1, turned him into a reliable ally with heroic pursuits on par with the main crew. Then in the second half, they flip the coin over again and say, nah, he a jerk, we get to kill him now for betraying their trust. Hey writers, what the hell-sing? Pick one! You can't just write both enemy and ally and expect the big reveal and final blow to justify the mess that happened in between. Lotor was so good in Season 3, he could have been an awesome villain, or turned around and been an unlikely hero. Either way, he didn't have to live past Season 4. This character is just a mess. If you wanted him to be a bad guy, just make him a bad guy. Make him spout his ideals, and when we get to the linchpin point where they confront him about the colony, he doesn't apologize. Don't make him try and explain himself, or look like he's a good guy. Don't flip him, don't knock him out until after we've had a rational person like, say, Hunk, ask, well, you're gonna stop doing that now, right? We have all the quintessence you need to do anything you could want to now that you reached the field, so the Alteans never have to be used again. We imply that he'll still need to answer for his dishonesty and crimes against life, but here he at least has an out and a way of being redeemed. But bad guy Lotor then says, nope, and jumps ship, moving into the final phase of whatever his master plan is. You know, the one they never actually told us about in the series. Just please explain what he was even doing in this series. There are also ways to effectively write Lotor into a good guy, but you know what? I went into this series expecting a better villain, so I'm not even going there. We still have to talk about Clone Shiro. Okay, peeps. There was a theory I had heard among fans back when I had first caught up with the end of Season 3, that the Shiro that we are currently hanging out with is a clone. I hated this theory. I don't do fan theories in general, and there are so few exceptions to this rule. Shiro is a clone just sounded stupid. It is stupid, and how the whole issue is resolved is even more stupid. I don't know how else to describe it. Between Seasons 3 and 4, Shiro has some chronic migraines that gradually become worse. They have all the hints and whatnot. He talks about how he doesn't feel like himself, but a lot of this stuff didn't have to end with a clone being the reason. You know what my theory was? This was the real Shiro, but his really cool cyborg prosthetic Galra arm was being used as a conduit to manipulate him and turn him evil. In the very most extreme scenario, I had imagined Shiro completely succumbing to whatever his arm, which was probably infused with magic, was doing to him, and turning completely evil. Not like Clone Shiro evil, I mean like being the Galvatron to Zarkon's Megatron, like final boss of a season evil. I entertained the thought of the Paladins having to fight Shiro and end up killing him to free him from being used by their enemies. It would have been powerful, emotional, probably scarring, and would have had a huge impact on both the characters and the audience. Wishful thinking. I got too attached to this idea, and what I got was very disappointing in return, which is one of the reasons I don't do fan theories. First, the usual, a slew of questions. Who made this clone? Answer, Hagar. Question, why? Answer, probably to act as a spy or a saboteur. Question, does Zarkon know about this? Answer, probably not. No one knew about the planet bomb either. Hagar just does stuff. Question, how do we make a clone? Answer, the usual way. Question, wouldn't that need a DNA sample? Answer, they probably have his arm they took off of him however long ago floating around in some space formaldehyde somewhere. Remember, we were led to believe that they just took it one day. Question, did they take it for this specific reason? Answer, I don't think so, but if someone from the production team wants to correct me on that, I am open to being wrong. Question, was Clone Shiro helpful to Hagar at all? Answer, no. Now let's take a look at what all happened here. While Shiro is having these headaches, it seems that it's the fourth stage of Operation Kuron, the premeditated clone operation apparently. That's when Hagar forms a direct connection to him. How? Who knows? Probably a bug planted in his robot arm that connects to his brain. Because, that only works on a clone. Also, forget stages 1 and 2 exist, we don't need to mention those. So, she decides to activate this connection that at least allows her to see through not Shiro's eyes and spy on people the way she did with Narti, apparently with the host not knowing. Another question. We activate this power in Season 4, Part 2, Episode 2, but is this activated before or after Shiro makes the executive decision to give Lotor his Bayard? I don't understand Hagar's plan in the following episodes either. On one hand, she acts like she wants to see her son, but then she doesn't feel like supporting his ascent to the Galra throne, and backs Sendak as kind of her proxy. In the meantime, Clone Shiro, who we know as of the finale of this season is connected to Hagar at this time, is being weirdly supportive of Lotor trying to ascend the throne. So, is Hagar just fronting opposition to Lotor and using Sendak as a way to look like she doesn't approve of him publicly? Then Shiro, who she can also control, does the real work to put him in charge? At this point, Hagar definitely remembers who she was and how she is related to Lotor, and has shown genuine concern for his well-being when told that Zarkon was going to retrieve him. She has also said, "Bring me Lotor," where at the end of the season, we know she is finally trying to make a connection with him that she couldn't have for most of their lives. So part of this says, yes, Shiro was being controlled to a point where he helped Lotor out because Hagar had a convoluted plan to get her son on the throne this whole time, and the other part says, no, she didn't want him on the throne because she was having a mental battle between the Hagar side of herself and trying to become Minerva again, and at that time, Hagar was mainly still in control, and Hagar likes Lotor no more than Zarkon does. Either way, I see where Lotor gets his needless complications from. He really is his mother's son. Whoops, I started talking about Lotor again. But now that I've calmed down a bit, how about a solution? Once again, being suggested by my good friend. Lotor was the one who made the clone instead of Hagar. It actually makes the entire terrible clone situation better for a number of reasons. Lotor is the manipulative schemer who would plant a fake version of a paladin into Voltron. There are any number of reasons he would, including establishing a friendship with them easier. And Shiro's abnormal support and penchant for Lotor favoring executive decisions is explained much easier than guessing how much of Clone Shiro's actions were influenced by Hagar. Also, if Lotor had been the one to clone and control Shiro, then use him as a way of hindering the Paladins, planting a virus in their castle, and trying to personally kill Keith after they discovered the Altean Battery Project, is a real betrayal. It works towards fixing Lotor as a villain. How would Lotor clone Shiro? I'd explain that, but that's not the important thing here. After all, if it was important, they would have told us how Hagar did it. What is truly of importance here is how a small change like who was the one who made the fake Shiro automatically makes this season less of a trash party. I will say, because of my denial of the fan theory, the Clone Shiro reveal took me by surprise, and the scene that it happened in was actually pretty cool. The following fight is also one of my favorites in the series, even if it's the product of horrible writing decisions and ultimately ends at the worst possible thing that anyone could do to Shiro at this point. I'm also a sucker for Keith pleading with Shiro to snap out of it and saying, "I love you," prefaced with saying, "You're my brother," because that's what their relationship is, and I appreciate that. The fact of the matter is, the true Shiro was dead. His body was disintegrated in the finale of Season 2, and the Black Lion managed to salvage his consciousness and retain it. This, in and of itself, I find terrible, considering that they only have explained the elements here and foisted the rest of it into somehows, but at least it could still be salvaged. I mean, imagine if we split Zarkon's consciousness as well, and had part of that in the clone Shiro's body. True Shiro tried to call out to Lance before to warn him about the imposter, but he couldn't get the message across. He does manage to tell Keith, who will have to explain the situation to everyone else later. Shiro is still in the realm of the Black Lion's mind and manages to coach Keith into the final battle against Lotor, and that was pretty neat, I'll admit. When the battle is over, what happens? Do we get a tearful goodbye to Shiro? Do we all connect back to the lions to see his spirit off now that he can be moving on, knowing that his imposter has been dealt with and Keith is now the leader of the Voltron he was meant to be? Ha! Nope. We have Allura here, and Lotor just helped her get even more magical space powers. You know what that means. She takes Shiro's soul/consciousness out of the lion and puts it into the almost dead body of his evil clone, because Keith couldn't have just let go of the almost dead body of his older brother figure's evil clone. The clone's hair turns Shiro, and now bada bing, bada boom, the real Shiro is back again. Yeah! Who am I kidding? Shiro is dead. What is this human transmutation bullcrap? Shiro's dying means nothing if he won't stay dead, and his job was to be a mentor to the other paladins. He helped Keith finally become the character he was supposed to be, and should have just moved on after that, saying, "The universe is in good hands." Yes, I'm saying that I think 100% that Shiro should not have come back to life, because his life means nothing from this point forward. We can just have a flashback now to the Voltron show episode where Karan calls Shiro the most popular character, and he was never going to let him go. Ugh, there's a prophecy for you. Speaking of which, Clone Shiro was the one who had to go through all of that, so will true Shiro's soul just suck up all of those memories? And I have to point out that the fight between Keith and the evil clone ended with Keith cutting off the super epic Galra cyborg arm. Ugh. Any alternative to Shiro coming back to life would have been preferable. You realize he has to stay alive now, right? If he dies later, there will be no meaning to it. You really never intended to let him go. He has been through so much, can't he just rest in peace? No? Dang it. Poor Shiro. I'll miss him a lot. But Shiro is not the character who true Shiro once was, and as far as I'm concerned, Takeshi Shirogane is dead. See you, Space Dad. Are we done? Well, let's see what else Season 4 has to offer us. The visuals of the theme song still haven't changed, but why complain about that now? We have the lions running away from lava here, and by all accounts, I thought they were supposed to be borderline indestructible. I mean, acid is one thing, but the red lion is literally jumping out of a volcano in the opening, so this is odd. Lotor says, "Judge me based off of what I've done, and not just being my father's son," which is ironic again, because we're still judging him for killing Narti, which hasn't been brought up again. Another thing I need to know about is Lotor's information system, because he might have been in charge of the place where they were keeping Sam Holt, but why do we figure that he was a personal connection to Voltron? All Earthlings know each other, I guess. Whoever is driving here has terrible aim. Zarkon isn't really that small a target to hit, you guys. This archivist is super old. I need to know what the average Galra lifespan is, especially in relation to Altaeans now. I won't accept anyone not realizing who Krolia was the instant she showed up on screen. Her design is way too obvious. She even has more special eyes than anyone else. Altaean Alchemy Atlantis is in the Space Bermuda Triangle, which has been pointed out to be a universally unsafe location for eons. Question: when Lotor and Allura are on Orion, Allura solves all the problems, and I couldn't tell you if that's just supposed to paint Lotor as unworthy, or if they are just trying to make Allura the hero again. Allura, why the heck did you just jump out of your lion? What just happened here? Is this some sort of foreshadowing to you not being able to let Shiro move on in the finale? Or is this just some one-time Ultimatrix magical healing ability? This episode where Krolia and Keith spend flashback time together would have been a lot better if that had been the only thing happening in this episode, but no. We are punctured with bits of Lotor and Allura and Lance. Speaking of flashbacks, I want to know how this baby was made. How long was Krolia on Earth? Did they even try to disguise her, or was she just stuck in the house most of the time? As of the end of these flashbacks, the Galra have lost scouts in the Milky Way systems twice, and we just have to believe that that wasn't suspicious, and they had no incentive to check it out again for like 18 years just because Krolia came back and said there's nothing there, and the only reason they went back was because that's where Shiro went? Why do they care? Do Colavan or any of the other Blades know about this mother-son special space excursion? Also, they are tracking where Lotor's 100% Altaean quintessence is coming from, and this bothers me. Not because this is something that showed up in Season 3, so it seemed to have been a plan to find out about Lotor since then, but allow me to ask, How come they were never following where it was going? We only decided to figure out where it was coming from because... Did we just assume that it had to do with the rest of the Empire and all that jazz again? Now hear me out. If they followed these undocumented vessels carrying super quintessence to their source, that would have led us back to Lotor and given us the proper suspicions again to have at least Keith not trust him, and then follow the shipments to the location they were coming from to figure out why. What is so hard about writing that? We just had to try to the nth degree to make Lotor look objectively like a good guy despite— Stop! Okay, we're moving on. But speaking of suspicions, Lance bonding with the mice over being mutually neglected by Allura is definitely a reason enough for a jealous Lance to totally have the mice spy on Lotor and find out what he was hiding. So much better than the Blades accidentally stumbling upon it. The quintessence field didn't create Zarkon's evil instincts, it revealed them. Are you sure about that, Shiro? How was Romel's brother able to escape from that facility anyway? How long is it between his death and Keith and Crolia's arrival? Because to my awareness, Lotor hasn't visited these places once in the entire time this series has been going, and that's another writing flaw that could have easily been fixed by having Lotor go off on his own at some point in these 2 seasons, and have people like, I don't know, Hunk ask, yeah, where is he anyway? Man, I didn't even realize they made a 3rd one of these comet ships. I thought Anti-Voltron was only made of 2 of them for the longest time. As much as I love the clone Shiro versus Keith fight, what is this thing on Keith's face? I swore it was a scar, but it keeps disappearing and reappearing like it's trying to decide whether or not it wants to be there. If this is the space puberty we've all been waiting for, and some physical Galra characteristics are coming out of this asymmetrical facial mark is a crappy way of doing it, so I'm just gonna call it a scar. Also, these clones in these tanks have neither white hair nor scars across their faces, and this leads me to ask a whole other slew of questions. At least we do get Shiro's Mega Cyborg Galra arm. In the finale against Lotor, once again we use Allura Ex Machina to win. I think this happened at the end of the last 3 seasons in one form or another. Wait! Green Lion head wrist missile? Since when? Isn't that Pidge's cockpit? Why would you do that? I know you're crazy, but that's just stupid.
You found me.
Sure we did, Shiro. Sure we did. Matt has some free fall trauma in this episode, and I appreciate that. Episode 3 of Season 5 is a low-key, let's give Lance some attention episode, which is good while it lasts, but he's pretty much just the jealous one for the rest of the season. Last video, I said that the variety of distinctions and personality between the named Galra characters was impressive, and that still holds true. It's really fascinating. Also, Galra with irises and pupils aren't as strange as I thought they were, though Crolia's still look way too distinct. So I have this new headcanon that even with all his Altean weebism, Lotor's understanding of how Alteans work is still flawed. Because he mentions the Mark of the Chosen, and lists off special Altean abilities, including the shape-shifting thing, like it's something exclusive to the super magical Alteans, rather than all of them, and we know this isn't true. I like that we get to see Lotor's nanny. For frack's sake, we know his parents didn't raise him. But this just makes me ask again, how long do these guys live? She is old! This shielding facility is cool, if not just in concept. Because Hunk is the engineer, he gets to give the orders on how to fix it. Yay for Hunk! I like the Monsters and Mana episode more than the Voltron show episode, even though it is even less plot relevant and could have been better spent explaining some of the stuff I've been questioning this whole time. Koran as the buff barmaid is actually my favorite part. Also, I want to be a paladin has a bit of a double meaning when you realize this isn't our Shiro. But really, you beat a dragon with fire. That bugs. Lance coming to terms with the possibility that he has genuine feelings for Allura and being upset that she's so into Lotor at the time is another step for his character. Good on you, Lance, for realizing that you're not just shamelessly flirting anymore. Crolia and Shiro meeting is actually really sweet because they are practically family through Keith. Again, a good thing we learned from the incident involving the Altean colony is that not all of them were on Altea when it was destroyed. In a spacefaring universe, this makes sense, and I'm glad that at least something does. At this point, I like how Zethrid and Ezra look just as confused as I felt watching this all unfold. At least they tried to be smart here and destroyed the interreality gate to try and stop Lotor from reaching the quintessence field again. Lotor cracked and is finally acting like the villain he should have been. Too bad it's too little too late. He went bonkers, and that was the most entertaining part here. Also, there's this evil part of me that loved how outmatched the Paladins were when they were outside of the Quintessence field. Lotor landed some really great hits. Giving up the castle to save the universe would be a much more touching moment if I wasn't still confused about Lotor, but hey, we at least get a magical space crystal to remember it by. And we're finally going back to Earth? You know what? After all this space magic, I think I'm looking forward to that. Well, I'm capping it there. I think I managed to finally get all my feelings out about this, but I still have a third video to make. I was afraid this video was going to end up as much longer than the last one, but that's the price for me trying to be thorough. We're done here, everybody. Say goodbye to the Lotor part. Once again, thankful that I didn't decide to just make this one pain-in-the-butt long video. Yeesh. Thank you once again, people of Earth and elsewhere, if you managed to drag yourselves through this indignantly long video and are now watching the outro. If you managed to do it after slogging through the trenches of part 1, I now promote you from Spam Trooper to Spam Elite Guardsman. It means a lot. Thank you for your service. As always, if you liked this video, you can press all the appropriate buttons down there. Find the art and other links in the description, and, as always, feel free to let me know what you think about Netflix Voltron and what I've had to say about it. Whether you agree or disagree, comments are always welcome. I may have said everything I think matters, but I'm still up for some fun conversation. That's it, peeps. Time for me to go to sleep until I decide to finish this off in Stardust Crusaders. Rest in peace, Prince Lotor of the Galra Empire and Takeshi Space Dad Shirogane. Your unfulfilled potential shall be forever remembered. Hopefully, I'll see y'all in the next video, in a finale of a very long talk about Voltron. Ciao! Wait a second! Hot take! How tall is Lotor? I suddenly really need to know this.